A man in New York City was placed in a chokehold and died, and there appears to be a debate about what happened. So, in this video, I will go over this back and forth between Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and New York City Mayor Eric Adams, and all of the details of this case. So, this is I guess, a debate. I'm not really sure what there is to debate here once the information all came through, not to mention the whole video showing what happened. But let's start here. So, as the New York Times initially reported, a 30-year-old man died on the subway on Monday after he was placed in a chokehold. Witnesses said the victim had been acting in a hostile and erratic manner toward passengers on the train when the other man, 24, moved to restrain him. The restraining, weird terminology here considering it killed him, but here is the details of the specifics around what happened, so you get the full picture here. So Mr. Vasquez, who's the one that recorded the video of this happening, said in an interview that he was on the F train going northbound on his way to a date when the victim boarded the train and began yelling. Quote, "I don't have food. I don't have a drink. I'm fed up," the man screamed, according to Mr. Vasquez. "I don't mind going to jail and getting life in prison. I'm ready to die." Soon after, the 24-year-old man grabbed him. Mr. Vasquez said that the rider who was screaming was frightening but had not assaulted anyone. Very important point here, had not assaulted anyone. Quote, "It was a very tense situation because you don't know what he's going to do afterwards," Mr. Vasquez said in an interview Tuesday night. Mr. Vasquez's video shows the man being held down for at least 2 minutes before he stopped moving. The men continued to hold him down for about 50 seconds before releasing him. "He'll be all right," said one person on the train, as several others looked down at the man's motionless body. Now, I've read reports coming out since then, since this reporting, that he was held in that chokehold for about 15 minutes. The video didn't start shooting till he was already in the chokehold, so we didn't see from the video what happened before then. But I'm about to show you a screenshot, so in case you don't want to see anything from this, skip ahead about, 20 seconds. But here is a screenshot from the video. Here he is, being held in a chokehold here. And this is what ultimately killed him. Now, Jordan Neely, I'm not sure if I've said his name yet, but Jordan Neely is the man who was killed. Mark Levine here. And I've seen a lot of even higher profile Twitter accounts mention how they knew who this was because he's a Michael Jackson impersonator. He does his routine on the subway. And so as Mark writes here, "I saw Jordan Neely perform his Michael Jackson routine many times on the A train. He always made people smile. Our broken mental health system failed him. He deserved help, not to die in a chokehold on the floor of the subway." So this guy apparently a well-known street performer here, and very talented. Now, a little more. So in terms of Neely's background, so you properly understand his situation, or what his situation was. Neely was homeless and had been arrested at least 40 times before he was killed. His mental health deteriorated after his mother was strangled by her boyfriend in 2007 and found in a suitcase on the side of the Henry Hudson Parkway. In addition to grieving his murdered mother, Neely had to answer questions directly from her murderer when he represented himself at trial in New Jersey. Chris Brewer, an attorney who worked in the courthouse at the time, recalls the unsettling experience of watching the questioning unfold. Quote, "It landed in my bones to sit there," she recalled. The defendant would refer to himself in the third person or would refer to the murderer as someone else, and Jordan would correct him and said, you did X." So he has, this clearly had an impact on him. Afterward, he was never the same, according to his aunt, Carolyn. It had a big impact on him, she told the New York Post. He developed depression, and it grew and became more serious. He was schizophrenic, PTSD. Doctors knew his condition, and he needed to be treated for that. He did not get the help he needed either. The whole system just failed him. He fell through the cracks of the system, she said. How many times have we heard this? They fell through the cracks. When this happens so often, they are no longer cracks in the system. It is the system. The system failed him because the system is not set up to help him. And that's ultimately what led him to be in the position that he was in. Now, later on Wednesday, this was ruled a homicide. So the medical examiner investigated what happened, discovered, yes, he was choked to death. This is a homicide. He was killed. And there has been no arrest. So as Common Dreams writes here, Neely's death was ruled a homicide by the New York City medical examiner late Wednesday, but the 24-year-old former Marine who was filmed placing him in a chokehold had not been arrested as of Thursday morning. So as of recording this, it's Thursday afternoon. Maybe things have changed, but usually a homicide, there's a second part to that, right? Someone gets charged for committing the homicide, but that has not happened as of recording this. Vocal New York here, which is a organization in New York City, writes here, sorry, just to get their proper line, grassroots organization for healthy and just communities. So they discuss HIV, drug policy, incarceration, and homelessness. They write here, Jordan Neely's murder is a direct result of the sustained political, systemic abandonment of people experiencing homelessness and mental health complexities, fueled by press coverage that clearly influences policies and emboldens vigilantes. And in terms of this, the press coverage, I think they're referring to how, the fear-mongering, how the solution to everything is more policing, even though that tends to never solve anything, just makes things worse. But the way coverage of these stories normally are, and how it tends to, as they write here, emboldens vigilantes. Now, this is where AOC comes into this. So she quote tweets the original story here that I showed you from New York Times, saying Jordan Neely was murdered, and we now know that, in fact, yes, a homicide. But because Jordan was houseless and crying for food in a time when the city is raising rents and stripping services to militarize itself, while many in power demonize the poor, the murderer gets protected with passive headlines and no charges. It's disgusting. She goes on here saying, it is appalling how so many take advantage of headlines regarding crime for an obsolete, tough-on-crime, political, media, and budgetary gain. But when a public murder happens that reinforces existing power structures, those same forces rush to exonerate and look the other way. We shouldn't. Now we get to Eric Adams. So he was on CNN last night, and here is his reaction to a couple of responses, including AOC's.
To you. This is a response from the comptroller, Brad Lander. He tweeted this: New York City is not Gotham. We must not become a city where mentally ill human can be choked to death by a vigilante without consequence. There's also this from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Democratic Congresswoman. She said, Jordan Neely was murdered. What is your response to what they're saying here?
Well, both the Congresswoman and the controller is a citywide leader. And I don't think that's very responsible at the time where we're still investigating the situation. Let's let the DA conduct his investigation with the law enforcement officials. To really interfere with that is not the right thing to do. And I'm going to be responsible and allow them to do their job and allow them to determine exactly what happened here.
Can I just ask you, though,
yes.
I mean, on the question of vigilantism, what do passengers do in situations like that? Is it appropriate to take matters into your own hands?
Each situation is different, and how a passenger, we have so many cases where passengers assist of the riders, and we don't know exactly what happened here until the investigation is thorough. And each situation is different. I was a former transit police officer, and I responded to many jobs where you had a passenger assist someone. And so we cannot just blatantly say what a passenger should or should not do in a situation like that. We should allow the investigation to take its course.
All right. Yes. Allow the investigation to take its course. Also, this was filmed. Now you could say, well, maybe something preceded it that would have justified holding the man in a chokehold when he was already restrained for several minutes at the very least that ultimately killed him. It's one thing to restrain somebody that is maybe being actually violent, physically violent, and ensuring they don't hurt anybody. It's another to continue holding them when they are limp and murder them. I don't even know how there is any debate around this. Don't kill people. Especially, I mean, don't kill people generally, but especially if they are not a threat. I've been in many situations where I walk down the street and there's somebody acting erratically, and do I go over there and kill them? No. I avoid them. Now you may say, well, it's a subway, so it's confined area, confined space. People felt uncomfortable that this guy was angry. Okay, but did he show signs of actually hurting anybody, or that he was going to do that? Was he physically violent towards anyone at all in the situation? Was there a violent incident that was stopped because of it? Not according to the guy that filmed the video, who was there the whole time. He said he was not violent. That's what he says. So, had not assaulted anyone. This guy was there the entire time. I just don't. What's even more, I would argue, even more insane in terms of Eric Adams and his statement is what he says here. So this is a new comment, or it may have been that night, the same night, but here's the statement that he released. Any loss of life is tragic. There's a lot we don't know about what happened here, so I'm going to refrain from commenting further. However, we do know that there were serious mental health issues in play here, which is why our administration has, this is amazing, which is why our administration has made record investments in providing care to those who need it and getting people off the streets and the subways and out of dangerous situations. And I need all elected officials and advocacy groups to join us in prioritizing getting people the care they need and not just allowing them to languish. We're going to get to the care that he has been so generous with in the city, the care he has offered these people. But the idea that advocacy groups are claiming, oh, just leave them alone, allow them to languish, using Eric Adams' words here, as opposed to, no, getting them the help and services they need. I mean, that is all you need to read to know how full of shit Eric Adams is. Claiming that advocacy groups are saying, just leave them alone, as opposed to, no, maybe try and help them. So in terms of Eric Adams and all the help he has, the record investments he has done, this is, before I get to AOC's response to this, I got to read this. So Adams' method of getting people out of the streets and subways, announced as part of a new initiative late last year, has relied heavily on the New York Police Department rather than social services and has been condemned by human rights organizations. The mayor has empowered police to forcibly commit unhoused New Yorkers to hospitals, placing struggling community members at greater risk for violent police encounters, according to Human Rights Watch. We're talking about Eric Adams, the investments that he claims to have done are so terrible that human rights organizations are coming out and saying, hey, don't do this. This is ridiculous. This is against all data, all science. What you are doing is making things worse. Meanwhile, Eric Adams claims these are his record investments, putting money into policing. So a little more on that here from Human Rights Watch. They write, let me just zoom in. They write here, the push for involuntary treatment is not evidence-based. Studies of coercive mental health treatment have not proven positive outcomes. Instead, involuntary treatment risks further traumatizing people with mental health conditions. It is discriminatory and can lead to multiple human rights violations, including the practices of seclusion and restraint. This new policy also risks increased violent police encounters. People with mental health conditions are 16 times more likely to be killed during a police encounter. This risk is particularly exacerbated when the person living with a mental health condition is black. And even on Eric Adams and what he has claimed to have done, this investment in policing, there apparently is a ton more police now in New York City subways. And where were they during this entire incident? Like, even if you want to claim that was your solution, well, your solution that you invested heavily in was not even on the scene. And I don't think it would have helped the situation either, if they were. Now, let me get back to what AOC said in response to Eric Adams. So she replies saying, "This honestly feels like a new low, not being able to clearly condemn a public murder because the victim was of a social status some would deem too low to care about. The last sentence is especially rich from an administration trying to cut the very services that could have helped him." Now, a few more things here. So, over the past 24 hours, neither the governor nor the mayor have at all condemned the killing of a homeless man on the subway. And AOC replies to that saying, "I cannot even begin to state how much of a profound failure of leadership we have seen in the last 24 hours regarding Jordan Neely. Virtually every one of us is closer to being in Neely's shoes than we think. How could any leader struggle to condemn violence? Being poor or sick is not a license to be killed." And this is a very important piece here. This idea that we should just, like, what's the argument? We should be allowed to put anyone in a chokehold who yells something on the street. We should be allowed to take them down and kill them. Because that's what apparently some people are arguing. As you can see, I don't have a lot to say here, because to me, it's just, this is so obvious what has to be explained. Last thing here. Kimberly Crenshaw says, "Being black and poor in America should not be crimes punishable by vigilante death. Jordan Neely did not just deserve to live. He deserved to live a better life than what our society decided to afford him. We are devastated by his loss." And this is the African American Policy Forum's full statement there as well. So I don't like covering these stories. I really don't. But the idea that there's any debate at all about between the elected officials over what happened here, or what should be done, where the investments should be, I don't know how much more evidence, science, information, experiences, stories people need to see. It's all very clear.